If our children are the seeds and we are their gardeners, how we plant them and the way we tend to them will determine if they reach their full bloom. So we choose to listen to our intuition, focus on connection, and stay deeply rooted in order to make the most of every season in motherhood. We don't have all the answers, and we probably never will. We are learning as they grow. This is our journey, and by sharing our truths, we hope to encourage anyone along the way. Welcome to the Learning as They Grow podcast. Hello, and welcome back to Learning as They Grow. I'm your host, Alisha Foster. This week, episode 2, we are going to be talking about my birth story. I thought it would just be a great way for you to really get to know me and some of my values that started early on whenever I became a mother, and just getting to know some of the trauma that I went through with my birth, how I've overcome it, and how it shaped me and my husband and our family and some of our choices. So before we get started, I wanted to share something that is a correction from last week's episode. So if you listen to last week's episode, episode 1, I was discussing cesareans, C-sections, and just talking about how serious of a procedure they really are. And I had said that they cut through about 4 layers to get to baby. And I was actually wrong. I did some research after and talked to some other moms, and they actually cut through 7 layers. So this might be something other people know, but I just wanted to correct myself and let y'all know. So this is something that I did a breakdown on my pages. If you want to go to Learning as They Grow on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, I kind of did a breakdown showing with felt how they cut through the 7 different layers and what all that consists of, and why you might feel things like nerve damage or have issues growing your ab muscles back and things like that. So check that out if you want. But yeah, just wanted to make that correction. We're going to get started with the highs and grows from this week. So this week, my high was getting to go see some baby goats at a local church nearby. We had heard that baby goats were born a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking forward to getting to see them. And some friends of ours who actually work at the church invited us out for the day, and didn't know that they not only had the 10-week-old goats that were born and they were just adorable hopping all around, but they also had brand new baby goats that were like hours old. And so it was really awesome just getting to see that, talking about it with my girl, and just showing her, this is a baby goat and there's its mama, and it was learning to walk. It was just so awesome. So that was our high of the week. And anybody who knows me, my husband, and my daughter knows we love animals, and goats are kind of my favorite. So they actually offered for me to take one home, and I was so tempted, but just don't have the land for it yet. But I will be going back to get one once we get some land. So that was really exciting. My grow of the week is a mixture of highs and lows that have definitely just made me grow in this process. So my baby became a full-blown toddler. It is very wild to just kind of see, you start seeing some slow progressions of this, but then it felt for us like one weekend, we just noticed a big change. And it was to no surprise, really, because she had been getting a little more attached than usual. She had been nursing a lot more, which I was like, okay, she's got molars coming in. But I also noticed that she was having a growth spurt and some developmental growths going on. So it was like just in a couple of days, we suddenly noticed a change in her. And it's been a little hard. I'm not going to lie. Like, it is hard having your baby go from being a little bit more needing you and depending on you to just wanting to be independent and doing things on her own, which is amazing. And I love it. But she is finding her voice and she's getting very vocal, and that has been kind of the hardest challenge. She is having to learn a little bit of patience right now, as am I. And so that has been my biggest grow, is learning patience again and learning how to help her through each of these growths that she's going through. So I'm definitely going to keep y'all up to date on how this goes. We have some big transitions coming up for our house. Like, we're transitioning her into a toddler bed soon. Really looking forward to that. Just really excited for that freedom of her to be able to get up and down. Right now, we sometimes just put her mattress on the floor and let her just crawl around, and she like sits there and likes to read her books and play. So we're really excited to have that as a bed area where we can lay and read with her, and just kind of get the crib out and not really be into the crib aspect anymore. We're kind of over that. There's been a couple of times my husband and I have both had to crawl into the crib with her, and it's just been a whole thing. And so, yeah, that will be changing. And then we also got a potty. This is a big step that I didn't think we would be tackling just yet, but she has been becoming very aware of her diaper, and she's like pulling it off and just like letting me know when she's gone to the bathroom. So I figured, let's go ahead and get a potty set up. And so that's been fun, just like having her sit there. She hasn't gone potty yet. I'm not really going to do the whole like training thing. I don't think. I'll keep you updated on that, but I just want it there for her as an option. So anyways, those are some exciting things coming up, but through this whole process, I am definitely having to grow and learn how to help her through each of these things. And just the mom that I am has always been like a research and reaching out to people and like, hey, how did you do this? What worked with this? What worked with that? So now that we're in some of these new stages, I'm having to like download a lot of information very quickly and just try to keep up with where she's at and just embracing this new season. I'm really excited, but I'm definitely having to learn a lot right now. So it's a fun time. Okay, so that was my high and my growth for the week. Let's go ahead and get started with the episode of my birth story. So this is going to be kind of the first time for me, I guess, just like spilling it all out at one time. I've written it down. That was very therapeutic for me. I've talked to friends here and there and told them, pieces and parts, and you try to get your birth story out, but it's long, it's a lot. And then you like look back and realize that there's parts that you missed or like details that you just wish you would have been able to share. And you don't have an hour to just sit and tell somebody your whole story. So this will kind of be my first time doing this, and I'm actually looking forward to it. I think it's going to be very helpful for me. I consider my birth being kind of a traumatic birth for me and my baby. So it is something that I've kind of had to work through, and I'm definitely on a better side of it, and definitely feel more prepared for next go around. But I think talking about it one time all the way through, and maybe being able to even look back at this episode for myself, will be helpful for me to process some of the emotions that I went through during that time. So okay, let's get started with where we were, how far along I was, all that. So we had decided to go through a birth center, and I'll do a whole episode on that and why we made that choice. It really kind of boiled down to COVID times and some of the protocols that were happening in the hospitals that we just weren't really down for. And so as we began diving into different options, we really just had our eyes open to this beautiful world of birth center and home births and things like that. So we learned a lot in a short amount of time, honestly, thinking about it. It was my 20-week appointment when I made the switch from my OB to the midwives at the birth center. And so from 20 weeks to 41 weeks, so just about 21 weeks, me and my husband both learned a lot and really prepared for this birth. So we actually were 41 weeks and 4 days. And so this is kind of, I think, a great place to start with my story, because this kind of shapes a lot of things that happen. So because in Texas, I know each state has different laws, I guess, which I've actually looked into it more, and I think it's more so comfortableness of what doctors feel comfortable with, and states, and then they kind of set it into place of how long a woman can be pregnant. Now, most people probably know 37 to 42 weeks is full term, and anything before that is preterm, which can be risky, and anything after that is post-term, which can also be risky. Therefore, 42 weeks is a cutoff. They will not allow you to most hospitals and doctors will not allow you to deliver after that 42-week point. Therefore, I was quickly approaching that 42-week point and was kind of starting to run out of options. Now, something that was interesting is my midwives were not concerned when I was 40 weeks and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not gonna, be able to birth here because I'm gonna hit that 42-week cutoff. They didn't seem too concerned. They're like, there a lot happens in 2 weeks, and if not, then we have some options and things we can discuss. And during the 40 to 42-week period, I went and saw a doctor that did an ultrasound and was able to really do a full test checking, making sure there was enough amniotic fluid and my baby was still in a good position. Everything was okay and still safe for me to continue. So that all went great. I did 2 of those. Everything was still doing really good. And we got to 41 weeks and 4 days. And at that time, my midwife said, all right, we're a couple of days away from, the cutoff point where you'll no longer be able to birth here. And your only option will be going to the hospital, getting induced, which I really wanted to avoid. And so I said, okay, let's do whatever we got to do. And being in the birth center, they're all about the natural route as much as possible, which I really appreciated and was all for. And speaking of, it's hard to know what your actual cutoff of 42 weeks is, because at the end of the day, that is an estimated due date. And that's where I'll get into that in a minute. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. Okay. So at 41 and 4, I had an appointment with my midwives at noon. I went in, they asked if I wanted to do a membrane sweep. We had tried one previously and it didn't work. And anyone who doesn't know, a membrane sweep is where they go in and try to separate the, I need to look into that more, but I think it's the amniotic sac from the uterus or from the cervix. I need to look into that more. Don't hate me if I'm wrong on this. I'm learned a lot in a short amount of time, like I said, but I will absolutely check into that and post on my page what the correct procedure is for that. But okay, so they did a membrane sweep where they separated something inside of me, and it causes baby just to be a little more prepared, like, oh, hey, birth is happening and you're going to bleed during that time if it is successful, and just kind of start getting everything moving. So we tried that for a couple weeks prior and it didn't work. And so at this time it did start to work. And then they also went ahead and said, go ahead and do blue and black cohosh, which are just a natural tablet that you can take. It comes from nature. If you look into it, it's like a flower or a plant that just helps kind of soften the cervix and get everything ready, moving. And so they did that. And then the big one that they did that I kind of look back on and I'm like, maybe I will not do that next time, was castor oil. And you can look online. There's so many things of different views on castor oil. It can be non-harmful if you use it correctly. And it just helps soften everything up and get going as well. But it does taste really gross. So something cool that they did is they told me, put it in a root beer float. And so I was like, cool, I love root beer floats. And it actually worked. It was great. So I did that. But the reason I regret that is it definitely kicked me into labor, but it also upset my stomach really bad. So I was like, oh, I'm having contractions and I'm having to go to the bathroom for hours. So I would definitely, I don't know if I took too much. I don't know what I did, but it might have just been a combination of a lot of things going on. And it is natural as your baby starts to come down a little, they're pressing on some stuff in the back, and it's common that moms say they feel like they have to poop. That's just kind of a thing. And so I don't know. I don't know if that was the best route for me or not, but anyways, so I went ahead and I did that and definitely got things moving. On my drive home from my appointment, I started having my first contraction. I had to pull over into the HEB parking lot and was like, what is happening? By the time I got home, I was like, all right, I think I'm feeling things. And 4 o'clock, I remember being hopeful that labor would start. But I was also nervous because I had been waiting for weeks, as you can imagine, from 40 weeks and all the way to 42 weeks, just waiting and waiting and wondering, is this baby going to come on her own? Is she ready? And so I was like, I don't want this to be false labor. I don't want this to be Braxton Hicks. So we just waited, and 7:00 p.m. I sent out a text to a bunch of my friends and family, just asking for prayers that this would turn into active labor. We were ready to meet our girl. We were so excited. And sure enough, it happened. I started going into active labor. I didn't even realize I was in active labor. We were here laboring at our house to get ready for everything. The midwives had recommended having the contractions being 2 to 3 minutes apart for 2 hours long before even saying, hey, I think we're ready to come up to the birth center. So we knew about that. I knew that she said, rest. Whenever you start feeling any type of contractions, try to rest if you can. I tried. It was very hard, but I think I took a little nap around like 10 p.m. And then I decided to get in the bath and just kind of like try to relax a little bit more. I knew we were going to have a long day ahead of us. So I got in the bath and didn't realize how far or how close my contractions were until my husband let me know. He's like, hey, your contractions are 1 to 2 minutes apart. I'm like, how do you know? He said, I can hear you in there. And so I was just moaning and groaning and going through the contractions, and they were 1 to 2 minutes apart by midnight. This was midnight on January 18th. So I said, okay, well, let the midwives know, and then we made a plan. By 3 a.m. we went up to the birth center, and at that time my contractions were still 1 to 2 minutes apart. We had to drive to the birth center, which that is something for my next birth I really want to avoid. I think I'm going to try to go for a home birth, just so that we can avoid that drive. It is rough driving whenever you're contracting 1 to 2 minutes apart. You can't get comfortable. You don't want to put a seatbelt on. So yeah, I'm going to try to avoid that next time. So we got to the birth center 3 a.m. and they checked me. I was 6 centimeters. And so, we're like, yes, good. We're making progress. We had heard, this is good. This is good news. You're doing good. And like, just get ready. We've been talking about this. We've been preparing for this. We're so excited. So I want to share a quick picture. I'm going to share my screen for anybody who's watching the video. If you're listening to the audio, I'll kind of talk you through what we're seeing. If you would like to see the video, you can jump on YouTube and you'll be able to see the full video here. So I want to show a quick picture of just our setup at the birth center. So this is, nope, not that one. Hold on 1 second. So this is the birth center setup. It was really just like peaceful, a little hippie-ish. They had twinkly lights, the birth pool, which I was really excited and wanted to try to birth in that. And it felt so good. I will say the water on the contractions in my stomach and my back, I had really bad back labor, and it just felt so good. So water birth was feeling really great. And that is where I wanted to be the whole time. I think I spent hour plus and then get out, move around, and I'd get back in. And if you see to the back left, I have a birth board. I decided to make this to try to motivate myself and keep myself in the good mindset during birth. I'll upload a picture on my page about that, just if anybody's interested in making that. But it had things like this too shall pass. And I had pictures of mountains and waves and just things that really I needed to put in my mind that these contractions are only going to be a minute long. They're going to pass. You're going to survive it. And it really helped me. I also had my phone on. I had a playlist going of just like good vibes only music. And it just really got me in the mindset. It made me excited that every contraction was getting me closer and closer to meeting my girl. So that was really awesome. And my husband, as y'all saw in that picture, was just by my side the whole time, being my rock, doing amazing things. Anything I needed him for, he was doing it and doing awesome. So that was our setup. It was great. And like I said, we were at the birth center. So that's something that is different at the hospital is you have freedom to move, which is a game changer. It was amazing getting to move around. And because it was in the early morning, nobody else was there. And we were able to move around the whole facility and even got to go out back at sunrise. I'll share this picture next. We even got to go out back at sunrise and see the sunrise while sipping on, my husband was drinking his coffee and I was sipping on some warm tea, and I had a couple contractions out there. And I just think that's so cool to like get to be in nature. There's a big, beautiful tree, which trees are my thing. I love it. And just really being at peace during what can be a very stressful time for some women. So that was just all such a beautiful moment and experience for my husband and I, getting to experience birth in that way. And I'd highly recommend it for anybody who wants to go that route. If you have any questions or concerns, always feel free to reach out. I would be happy to share more of that experience with you. But yeah, so I was just moving freely through my contractions. I think I totally lost track of time. Honestly, there was a clock on the wall, but I just kind of stopped looking at it. In my mind, it was like, we are here, we're going to be here until she is here. And I am just trying to be in the moment, trying to be in the right mindset. So my husband and I just moved around. He helped me through a lot of the contractions, every single one. We had a different, we had been given some tools, I guess you'd say, beforehand during a class that we took where we learned different ways that he could relieve pressure for me, and depending on where I was feeling pain and stuff during contractions. And one of the biggest ones was I was having a lot of back pain. So he would do what's called a hip squeeze, and he would just stand behind me and just squeeze my hips as hard as he could. And it was the most amazing feeling at that time. I remember practicing that one during our birth class preparing. And I was like, oh, that hurts. I don't like that. Don't do that to me during birth. But then when I was in labor and I just had that intense pain of contractions, I was like, please squeeze it out of me. And it felt amazing. And we actually had, so we had 2 midwives and a birth assistant who were on our team. And the birth assistant was so sweet and would try to, relieve my husband's hands, because if you can imagine, every 1 to 2 minutes, he is having to put all of his pressure and strength into this squeeze. And he was doing it every single one, but whenever he'd need a second to step away or go to the bathroom or just walk around for a sec, this sweet birth assistant would try to step in. And she's probably like 110 pounds and just squeezed with all her might, but it felt like a butterfly was just sitting on my back and nothing was being relieved. So it was just really a funny time to be like, okay, I need my husband back in here in his strong arms. So that was really cool. If I didn't have him through this, I don't know if I would have been able to make it as long as I did. That is something that I just want to encourage anybody, get your partner on board. Birth does not have to be a scary thing. It can actually be a beautiful thing. And during that time, my husband and I, like, we had gotten married a year prior. And, you feel at your wedding, but that is just the most beautiful time, the most amazing, the most in love you'll ever be. And it was amazing. But birth, going through all those motions and kind of dancing through contractions and just supporting one another. And he saw me in a light that I think he had never seen me in, and was just so complimentary to be like, you're such a warrior, you're so strong. And that just like made such a connection at that time. My husband and I just felt so in love and so overjoyed that we were going through that together. So get your partner on board if you can. I know a lot of times birth is scary for husbands because they've never seen their significant other in the pain that they're about to be enduring. And it's something that I think is important to understand is it doesn't have to be a bad pain if you can use those contractions to try to push baby down and just try to move through them. It doesn't have to be a bad pain. It can actually be like kind of exciting for some people. I'm not going to go too much into that because I don't know, that's not my jam, but some people can feel just a wave of endorphins and just happiness during those contractions. And for me, I felt that happiness solely because my partner and I were just in sync with that. And he was continuously reminding me to not, let my screams or my yells get high, instead get low, and just be in the contraction. And it helps so much. So yeah, big spiel to say, definitely see if you can get your partner on board to support you during that time. Something else I wanted to share during our birth, let me find the picture real quick. So here is my husband supporting me again during birth at the birth center on this big bouncy ball, and just has a cool cloth to my head and providing me apple juice and water and all the things. And it was just 24/7 assistance. And so it was amazing to have that. Bouncy balls are where it's at, by the way. If you are even pregnant or laboring, I would definitely recommend trying. I know it's not for everyone, but trying a bouncy ball, it just kind of helped me like relieve some of the pressure off of my back. Like I said, I had a lot of back pressure and back labor during that time. So check out if a bouncy ball is for you. You definitely have to kind of play around with it before, have it at your house, get comfortable with it. Some people like it more firm, some people like it soft. So yeah, that was something that I enjoyed spending a good amount of time on as well during labor. So, okay, all the great stuff, all the beauty in my birth story, and that I'm so glad I get to share and like actually have, because that encourages me to look past any of the hard stuff that I'm about to share, and just remember how beautiful birth can be, and continue to encourage people to try to go the natural route if possible for them. Try to move through labor, try to have a partner who's on board with you, because there's such a beauty in it. And it's just such a high to be able to experience that. So at some point in my laboring, I got checked, which I did not have many cervical checks. This is something that whether you're in a hospital or a birth center, you can opt out on and just say, I'm not comfortable being checked all the time. Can it just be monitoring? And that's another thing. They had a fetal monitor that was mobile. So they were able to follow me around and just check me rather than me having to be all strapped up. And so I got checked maybe 3 times total. And at the second time, they checked and said that baby had turned. Baby went transverse, which transverse means that baby is now sideways. Head is in one rib, feet are in the other rib, or butt is in the other rib. So she had been in a perfect position majority of the pregnancy, and suddenly she turned. This is something that happened after something huge that I think was a game changer in my birth happened. So during laboring, my water hadn't broke yet. And this is something that, again, can happen with midwives or doctors, but they can often recommend that they can break your water for you. And while this can work, a lot of times there are risks with interventions. And my husband and I feel that that might be something that caused some of the hardship that I'm about to share as well. So the midwife asked if she could break my water, and we were just like, okay, like we trusted her, fully, just as people trust their doctors and their birth team as well. And she broke my water, which felt very invasive for me. And it actually was painful too, which, can be painful. And it didn't happen immediately, but a couple hours went by and, I wasn't progressing. And suddenly that's whenever baby went transverse. So we're looking back and thinking breaking my water might've caused shock to my baby in the womb. And she just was not ready. And there's just a lot that could have affected. So that's something that we look back on and we're like, we're going to pass on that intervention next time, because babies actually can be born in the water bag. I don't know if y'all know that, in the amniotic sac, they can be born in that, and then they can break the water as the baby comes out. I know a lot of people think, oh, you're in labor when your water breaks and you rush to the hospital, but that's actually a very rare situation. A lot of times you hear of people's water not breaking until later in laboring, or it has to be broken for them. So again, this is just something to know your options, know that you can opt out on this and say, no, I'd rather not have my water broken. Let's continue to labor. And I wish I would have done that, because once that happened, my baby did go transverse. And then I spent hours. I had no concept of time at that time, but I spent hours doing, if you look up spinning babies is a method of different just exercises, movements that you can do during pregnancy, and I guess during birth too, to try to help get baby into the right position. So this was something I had already known about. I had been doing for weeks prior because I wanted to make sure my baby was in the right position for birth. And spinning babies, if you look it up, there's some where it sounds silly, but you have your legs on a bed or a couch in a kneeling position, and then you put your forearms down on the ground. And so you're literally at a inverted upside down position. And you do this for 30 seconds to a minute or whatever it may be. And there's a couple of different ones where you kind of hold baby up, you put your hands under the belly and the baby and just kind of lift during contractions. And so these were all things that were no problem for me to do during pregnancy, pre-labor time, but during labor, I was having to do these things mid-contraction. And guys, that was crazy. It was obviously painful. I wanted to be in the most comfortable position that I had experienced at that time during labor. And that was a lot of times just moving around or being in the water. But instead, I was having to do some of these crazy positions to try to get my baby back down. One of the craziest positions I experienced is I literally had to hover over the birth pool, where my forearms were on one end of the tub and my legs, my shins, were on the other end, and my belly was kind of just over the water. And something about gravity is supposed to work that baby back into the right position. And I had to do that in the middle of contractions. That was the hardest thing. And that was something that my husband was like, wow, you're such a warrior. You're doing it. You're amazing. And I did too. And they're like, okay, if you want to stop, we can check again. And I was like, no, let's keep going. I'm going to do it again. So I did it for a third time. And that was just really rough, for my third contraction at that point. And then they checked me and baby had moved back down. So I spent hours working on getting baby back down. Baby finally got back down. I was so excited. I'm like, yes, we did it. I'm, feeling like this is turning around, and I'm getting to where, okay, I'm about to be in the stage where I can get ready to push. And I was excited for that. But at that check, they said, okay, you're still only 7 centimeters. And now baby's head is coning, which freaked me out. I hear now it's totally normal. Baby's head sometimes cone because they get stuck in the canal, and they're just working their way out. And as the baby's born, their head molds back. And that's actually why baby's soft spot is there. All of their bones in their skull has not fused together yet. So they're made that way to be able to come out and be able to have their head form back normally. But my baby had been stuck in that position for a while, down, stuck in the canal, that she was really getting a cone head. And for some reason in my mind, that just freaked me out. I was like, my baby has a cone head. I pictured the old 1980s sitcom of the cone heads. And so it just really bothered me at that time. But I was focused on that, something silly that I didn't even realize wasn't that big of an issue, while my midwives were concerned about the fact that I was still only 7 and kind of regressing back down to 6 centimeters dilated. So as that was happening, I started noticing that my midwives were kind of whispering to each other, and they started talking with my mom and my husband. And I didn't really think that much of it. I just was like, okay, I've got to get now that my baby's back down, I've got to get dilated more. I've got to get back in the zone. And so I just kept on working on moving through the contractions and really just laboring. And unfortunately, in the midst of that, it was about 4:30 or 5 p.m. So I had been in active labor now since I think 11 p.m. or midnight. And my midwives came over and told me that I was probably going to need to be transferred to the hospital. And this to me was just kind of devastating. I knew it wasn't the end of everything, but I just had envisioned being able to birth my baby at the birth center. I had really gotten in the mindset of what it takes to birth naturally. And I had overcome a lot of fears of mine. I actually have a very low pain tolerance. And so in the beginning of pregnancy, I thought, there is no way I'm going to be able to birth a baby naturally. I was terrified for years before pregnancy, even of natural labor pains. And I just worked really hard for 9 months to get myself in the right mindset, and never thought I would have wanted to birth naturally. And then, here I was, and I was so excited, and I was like, we're doing it. I'm doing this. Check me out. And then to be told that I wasn't going to be able to continue. And they actually told me not only did I need to be transported to the hospital, it wasn't an emergency, but I needed to possibly get an epidural so that I could rest, is what they had worded it to me as. They said, you've been laboring now, you've started your contractions 24 hours ago, you've been in active labor, for a long time, 16 hours, and you are exhausted, and we haven't even reached the hardest part yet. So I think you just need to go get an epidural so you can rest. So my husband and I kind of looked at each other, and I was very emotional in that time. But he was 100% supportive and just was like, let's go ahead and do that. It's okay. I know it wasn't, our vision, but it's going to be okay. Like, you can still try whenever you get to the hospital after you rest to get your baby out naturally and through vaginal birth. So after a little bit of heartbreak with that, I accepted that we did need to transfer, and we loaded up in my mom's car. My mom was there during the whole birth, which was just so awesome to have her there. That's something that I am really thankful that we decided to have not only my husband, but also my mom there, because I wasn't really sure at first. I just kind of wanted to be in the zone, and I didn't want too much commotion going on or too many people in the room. And I just didn't know how helpful it would be to have my mom there. And this was something that I look back on, and I think it really helped bond my mom even more as mothers, and just being able to see me in that new light as a mother. So that was really awesome. And I'm very thankful that I had her there for that. And she was really supportive, like went and got us lunch halfway through so I could eat and refuel, which is something kind of different at the birth center. You are able to eat, and they encourage eating and drinking to get your electrolytes up and just keep on being able to have energy to push through labor. So it was just really cool. She was able to relieve my husband during some times whenever he needed a break, and she was there for me, supporting and encouraging. So that was awesome. But yeah, so my mom loaded up the car and had my husband and I in the back seat, and we had an option to go to the hospital that was right down the street. However, we wouldn't be able to pick our doctor, and the doctor I had previously seen for my checks for the fluid and making sure baby was good after I passed the 40-week mark was at the hospital that was about 30 minutes away. And so I'm like, okay, let's just do it. Let's make this decision. Let's go. So we loaded up, and we did not think about the fact that it was 5 p.m. by that time. And we were in rush hour traffic on the freeway, and my mom was killing it, just cruising in and out, trying to get us to the hospital. But yeah, that was the most intense moment, because I had been moving and grooving and in this like free mindset, and then suddenly I was just confined to a car, and contractions were hard. So yeah, 2 times being in the car during active labor, that was kind of rough. Another reason why I'm like, next time I'll be doing this at home to avoid driving anywhere. So yeah, so we get to the hospital, and this was kind of a plan, like maybe C or D in my mind. It was like, okay, I want to do a water birth naturally at the birth center. That was plan A. But if the water doesn't work out, that's okay. I can birth her on the bed or in a different position or somewhere else. Those are like A and B. And then of course I'm like, okay, if we have to go to the hospital, I can mentally prepare myself for that too. So we got there, and we knew kind of what to expect. There were certain things that we just had to advocate for ourselves and for our baby that go against some things that the hospital just naturally, I think, pushes onto people. And it's just kind of how they do it. And that there were a couple of things that we knew we were going to have to say, hey, we don't want X, Y, and Z. And we can save all that conversation for another episode. If anybody's interested in saying, wait, what do you mean? You can tell them you don't want certain things. You're welcome to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to have that conversation. But there were just certain things that I'm like, nope, we're not doing that. We are here. I am birthing. And it was actually nice to see we had really great nurses that respected that, and everything was good. The only issue I had was when they did a shift switch. I had the nurses that were so sweet and like so helpful this whole time standing right next to me, telling the other nurses like, oh yeah, she had to come here because the pain got too much. And I had to interrupt and be like, it didn't get too much. I'm actually not in too much pain. I just am tired, and they told me to come here. So that was one thing that I was like, I'm not in pain. I'm rocking it. I'm doing good. I kind of need to like stay in my mindset, that these contractions are not painful, but they're instead just like surges and just pressure that I need to use to get my baby out. Because if I started focusing on, oh, this is painful, then I would kind of like get in a bad mindset. And anyways, that was just something that at the time I remember kind of fighting the nurse on. And so at that time, once we got in, they told me I had to stay in the bed because they needed to have me hooked up to monitors. And I said, nope, I've been moving freely this whole time. And while I understand you'll have to monitor me, like I need to move as much as possible. And now is not the time for me to stop, because that's going to regress me even more, is kind of where my mind was with it. And so they were, trying to respect that and trying to offer me some options. And in the midst of all that, we're waiting for the anesthesiologist to come in and give me my epidural, which I was like, fine, I'll just take it. And once I did, it was interesting. I was like, wow, I feel contractions, but I'm not having to like move. I'm just sitting here, and it's like, wow, I feel a little bit of pressure. So that was kind of interesting for me. And so after they got me all situated, I labored for a couple more hours while going through all of that. The doctor came in and checked and said that at this point I had regressed to 6 centimeters, and my baby had turned sunny side up, which means her face was facing up rather than the opposite way with back to belly. And so that was kind of a red flag to them. And they said, it's just not the way we prefer baby to be. We can continue to try to labor if you want, but we're going to recommend a C-section. And that just really broke my spirit. I was very heartbroken at that time, as you can imagine. And for some reason, despite all of the preparation, all of the classes I took, all of the education that we had at our fingertips during pregnancy, and I learned all about C-sections, but in my mind, I just did not think that that was going to happen to me. I had a pretty healthy pregnancy. I was in good shape working, to prepare myself with the endurance of labor. And I just thought that I would be open to alternative birth plans, but I didn't think C-section was going to be a plan for me. Unfortunately, it was, and that was kind of like plan Z on my list. Like, yeah, if that happens, but I don't want to think too much about it because then I'll be in the wrong mindset. But that was the route that my birth ended up going. At that time, the baby's heart rate had spiked too, which was kind of frustrating on my end because from all of the research and like studying that we had done leading up, we knew that getting an epidural and can cause the baby's heart rate to spike a little bit, and it's something that they then monitor. And so it was like, okay, yeah, no, that's normal. Like baby's heart rate might spike, but it's gonna go back down. Everything will be fine. But we didn't really get the time to see if it did. And it was, like I said, one of those things the doctor offered saying we can. Again, it wasn't an emergency C-section, but it was 6:30 p.m. by that point. And he said, we can sit here and labor all night if you want, or we can go ahead and get you your baby and y'all can start resting, is what he said, which is kind of hilarious because anybody who's had a newborn knows you don't rest after they get here. And he said, you've been working hard, but at this point, we need to just get this baby out and let you be done laboring. So we fought it. I not really fought it, but we talked about it and I fought it, saying, no, I want to try. But we ended up deciding to go through with it, had a C-section. And that was, again, something just really traumatic for me because I had just got the epidural. I guess, in shock is what they kept telling me. And I was beyond exhausted. So once the anesthesiologist started working on getting me the anesthesia to numb the rest of my body and prepare me for the C-section, I began shaking uncontrollably to where my arms literally, as I was laid out on the OR table, my arms were literally just like rising up and I could not keep them down. It just felt like so much tension and pressure in my whole body. I was just shaking uncontrollably is the only way that I could really explain it. And I just felt really out of it. Like I just was not in the mindset that I wanted to be in, being kind of drugged up. And obviously that kind of has to happen whenever you're having a C-section. I had to be numbed. I've heard horror stories of people who the anesthesia didn't work or they had half of their body where it worked. And so I was like, hey, I guess I'm just happy that the numbness is working. But there still was a traumatic feeling for me that I kind of had to grieve my vision of my natural birth. And in the midst of all of that, I was kind of just out of it and loopy and not really able to come to when my baby girl was born. I was there, yes, and I was so happy when she was born. I do remember like hearing her cry and being like, wait, is that her? And my husband was right there with me. But there were just a lot of things going on at that time mentally that I look back and there's a lot of sadness, I guess, for me. When we moved into the recovery room, my baby was unable, or that's not true. She wasn't unable to. I wasn't able to nurse correctly. I was struggling to even like really sit up and hold her and be with it. So my husband had to jump in and help breastfeed. And thank God we did all those classes together. He understood how to get her to latch. He was able to really just help get her to breastfeed. And that was just really great to have that support. So a lot of people say, well, at least you're happy and healthy and your baby is here. But I've just got to share my truth with this because I think it could maybe help other moms out there who have experienced a traumatic birth or, didn't have the birth that they envisioned. Is yes, of course, you are happy that your baby is healthy and your baby is here, but that doesn't mean that you don't still get to grieve the loss of what you had anticipated your birth to be like. And no matter if somebody else has had it worse or you've heard of harder, birth stories, that doesn't mean that your birth story isn't still hard in your eyes. If it felt traumatic, it is traumatic. If you felt like you experience a loss, then that is what you are emotionally feeling, and that's okay to feel that, and it's okay to take your time to work through it. I'm saying this to my audience, but I'm also saying this to myself. This is something that I had to tell myself over the last 14 months, and I finally feel like I'm in a place where I am not afraid to try again. I would like to have a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean, and I'm able to be in a better mindset with myself that if I do have to have a C-section the next time, I will be able to accept that, and instead of kind of being shocked and not really accepting it in the moment. So all of that to say, that is my birth story of when my sweet Ellington Marie was born. And yes, it was one of the most amazing days of my life, but it was also one of the hardest days of my life. And I hope if anybody has ever experienced something like that, in whatever way, shape, or form that looks for you, that you're able to reach out, talk to other mothers, share your story as many times as you want. Find yourself a friend or a notebook or a podcast and just share your story until you feel at peace with it, until you can say, you know what, I'm good. I think I'm ready for my next story now. So that is my story. Thank you so much for listening to it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about anything from this podcast, always feel free to reach out to me. My name is Alisha Foster. I'm Learning as They Grow podcast. You can find me Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. I would love to hear from you. I am going to do a post here in this upcoming week where other mothers can share their birth story. And I would love to just hear anyone's birth story out there that is open to share, whether that is just a quick, here's how it went, if you want to do a video recording, or if you want to send me a personal message and just give me the whole spiel. I am here to listen. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and I look forward to talking to you all next week. Bye.